A little girl, barely 6 years old, appeared alone at the entrance of a high-end hospital, barefoot and clutching a tattered teddy bear. When the nurse coldly stated that her father wouldn't want to see a street urchin, no one imagined the millionaire who witnessed the scene would uncover a blood tie that would forever change 3 lives. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories delivered daily. The millionaire surveyed the cityscape through the expansive windows of his penthouse office. From that height, people resembled ants, small and insignificant, just as he deemed them. His steely gaze swept across the gleaming skyscrapers, vying for dominance against his own corporate headquarters. It was an empire forged with ruthless ambition, sharp intellect, and, as whispered in hushed tones throughout the building, a complete absence of heart. The platinum Rolex on his wrist marked exactly 3 o'clock when his assistant knocked and entered without awaiting a reply, a privilege reserved for a select few. "The board is waiting in the conference room," the assistant stated, maintaining the professional demeanor he'd learned to cultivate under his demanding boss. "And the hospital called again about the anonymous donation for the children's wing." The millionaire nodded curtly, betraying no emotion. His generous donations were never driven by compassion, but by calculated strategies for tax write-offs and public relations. On this particular afternoon, he decided to make a quick stop at the hospital before the meeting, not out of concern for the patients, but to ensure his name was discreetly yet prominently displayed in the right places. A few miles away, on the gritty streets of the forgotten side of town, the little girl clutched her worn teddy bear as she walked with unwavering determination. Her bare feet had long grown numb to the rough pavement, calloused by 2 years of life on the streets. Her once colorful dress was now a faded, indistinguishable shade of dust and time. Her eyes, however, shone with a fierce hope that defied her grim reality. Tucked inside a secret pocket she had sewn into the lining of the teddy bear, she guarded a yellowed newspaper clipping. The photograph depicted paramedics tending to an unconscious man after an accident. To any adult, it would be just another anonymous tragedy documented by the press. To her, it was a treasure map leading her back to her father. Passers-by cast fleeting glances of pity before continuing with their lives. Some offered spare change, others food. She accepted it with silent gratitude, but never lingered for long. Her mission surpassed hunger or exhaustion. When she finally spotted the mirrored doors of the upscale hospital, her heart pounded. Here, amidst the marble corridors and state-of-the-art equipment, was her father. She felt it with the unwavering conviction that only children possess. "Today will be different," she whispered to the bear, straightening its torn ear. "Today we find him." Meanwhile, the millionaire emerged from his black limousine in front of the very same hospital. His impeccably tailored suit and commanding presence created an invisible barrier between him and the world around him. Staff and patients alike watched with a mixture of awe and apprehension as he traversed the corridors as if they were extensions of his own office. On this afternoon, 2 vastly different worlds were about to collide in the sterile hospital lobby, an encounter that would challenge everything the millionaire held as absolute truth in his meticulously controlled existence. What he didn't know was that his past, so carefully buried beneath layers of success and indifference, was walking towards him, barefoot and clutching a tattered teddy bear. "Excuse me, my daddy's in here. Can I see him for just a minute?" The little girl's soft, tremulous voice barely cut through the din of the hospital's main lobby. Standing before the opulent reception desk, she appeared even smaller, like a speck of dust on the flawlessly polished marble floor. "Your father doesn't want to see anyone, least of all a street urchin like you." The nurse's words sliced through the air like a shard of ice. There was no kindness in her voice, only the coldness of someone who saw the child before her as an inconvenience, a blemish on the perfection of this sterilized environment. The millionaire, who was passing through the side corridor at that exact moment, stopped in his tracks. Something about the scene, perhaps the gratuitous cruelty, perhaps the quiet dignity with which the small figure faced the rejection, caused him to halt, as if he'd run into an invisible wall. "I'm not a street urchin," the girl replied, with surprising firmness. "My name's on this paper." She rummaged in the teddy bear's inner pocket and withdrew the yellowed clipping, extending it with trembling fingers. "See? That's my dad. The ambulance brought him here." The nurse barely glanced at the paper before gesturing to the security guards. "Take her outside, please, and don't let her back in." Two uniformed men approached, but hesitated upon seeing the silent tears that began to stream down the child's dirty face. There were no tantrums, no screams, just a look of pure desolation that seemed to belong to someone far older. The millionaire felt something inside him twist. That look. Where had he seen that look before? The memory struck him like lightning. The same eyes, the same shade, the same way of facing adversity without breaking. "Wait," he said, surprising himself with the resolve in his voice. All those present turned, immediately recognizing the imposing figure striding down the corridor. "Let me see that paper." The girl eyed him warily, but something in the quiet authority of the man made her extend the newspaper clipping towards him. The millionaire examined it carefully. The photograph showed paramedics transporting an unconscious man, his face partially visible. The date was 2 years ago. A wave of recognition washed over him with such force that he had to discreetly lean against the wall. The man in the photograph, despite the bruises and the awkward angle, bore undeniable resemblance to someone he had determined to forget long ago. "What's your father's name?" he asked, keeping his voice controlled despite the maelstrom that was brewing inside him. The girl hesitated for a moment before answering, as if the name was a precious treasure not to be shared with strangers. When she finally spoke it, the millionaire felt the blood run cold in his veins. "What's your name, little one?" he asked, completely ignoring the confused looks of the staff. "I can't tell my name to strangers," she replied, clutching the teddy bear to her chest. "But Daddy calls me Little Star." A memory flashed through the millionaire's mind, his older brother, years ago, talking about his fascination with astronomy and how, if he ever had a daughter, he would call her his Little Star. Without another word, the millionaire turned to the nurse, who now seemed to have shrunk several inches. "I want access to the records of all unidentified patients admitted in the last 2 years, immediately." "But sir, that's not possible without—" "I'm buying this hospital," he interrupted, with the same voice he used to close billion-dollar scheme deals. "Consider this my first audit." Turning to the girl, he knelt down, bringing himself to her level. It was the first time in years he'd placed himself on equal footing with anyone. "Would you like to come with me? Let's find your father." Together, the girl looked deeply into his eyes with that instinctive wisdom that only children possess, before slowly nodding. In the silence of that gesture, a bond began to form. Invisible, fragile, but potent nonetheless. The millionaire kept his gaze fixed on the corridor ahead as he strode through the hospital's domain. Each step was a struggle against the impulse to stop, turn around, and return to the ordered routine of his life. What was he doing? Why had he gotten involved? The questions hammered in his mind like a relentless alarm. Beside him, the little girl walked in silence, her small bare feet leaving almost imperceptible marks on the pristine floor. She still clutched the teddy bear to her chest, as if it were a shield against the world. "We need to get you cleaned up first," he said, breaking the silence. His voice came out harsher than he intended, the result of years avoiding any display of gentleness. "We can't go into the patient areas looking like that." The child looked up at him, a mixture of suspicion and hope shining in her eyes. "Are you really going to help me find my daddy?" Something in the simplicity of that question disarmed him momentarily. "I'm going to check if the person you're looking for is here," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "I can't promise more." Than that, the hospital's administrator awaited them with a nervous expression. Upon seeing the girl's condition, she couldn't hide a grimace of disapproval. "Sir, I must remind you that we have strict protocols. This child cannot wander through the wards without authorization, documentation, and, frankly, without meeting minimum hygiene standards." The millionaire felt a growing irritation. "Arrange for a room with a bathroom, clean clothes, something for her to eat, and bring the records I requested." As the administrator retreated to fulfill the orders, he found himself alone with the girl in the private waiting room. The silence between them grew, uncomfortable and filled with unasked questions. "Why do you think your father is here?" he finally asked, more to fill the void than out of genuine interest. The girl retrieved the yellowed clipping again. "Because the newspaper said the ambulance brought him here after the accident. And the lady at the bakery, who always gives me bread, said that sometimes people sleep a long time in the hospital after they hurt their heads." "And your mother?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. The little girl's face contorted in an expression of contained pain that seemed out of place on someone so young. "Mommy went to heaven when our house caught fire. She pushed me out the back window, but she couldn't get out." The millionaire felt something inside him crack. Fire. His mind flashed back to 2 years ago, when he saw the news report about a fire in the neighborhood where his older brother lived. He had tried to contact him at the time, momentarily overcoming the pride that had kept them apart for years, but never got a response. He assumed, as he always did, that the rejection continued, never that something serious could have happened. "I'm going to check on a few things," he said, standing up abruptly. "Wait here." In the corridor, away from the child's curious eyes, the millionaire felt the world spin around him. It was too much of a coincidence. The date, the fire, the girl's eyes, so similar to the eyes he saw every morning in the mirror. If this child was who he suspected, it meant he had failed not only his brother, but also a niece he never knew existed. His assistant found him standing in the hallway with a lost look, a sight so unusual that the man hesitated before approaching. "Sir, the meeting with the board." "Cancel everything," replied the millionaire, without taking his eyes off the wall in front of him. "And get the lawyer here, immediately. Is there a problem with the hospital acquisition?" The millionaire almost laughed at the irony. Problems. His carefully structured life was crumbling before his eyes, and all because of a barefoot child with a tattered teddy bear. "No, but I need information on temporary guardianship procedures and authorization for access to patients in critical condition." The assistant's eyes widened, but he knew better than to question. With a nod, he retreated to fulfill the orders. Back in the waiting room, the millionaire found the girl asleep on the sofa, exhausted after what appeared to have been a long journey. The teddy bear, now fallen to the floor, revealed a detail he hadn't noticed before. A small embroidery on the right paw, letters faded by time, but still legible. "To my little star, Daddy." That simple detail shattered the millionaire's last defenses. He had found something he didn't know he was looking for, and now he had no idea what to do with the discovery. "Unidentified patient, bed 1742, East Wing, 5th floor." The chief physician's words echoed like a final verdict. The millionaire examined the medical chart without really seeing the medical data recorded there. His mind was occupied with the fragments of reality that he now needed to fit into a coherent story. Induced coma for approximately 20 months. severe head trauma, fire victim, and subsequently found unconscious in the street, possibly due to a fall. The timeline matched perfectly. The fire the girl mentioned, the father's disappearance, the yellowed newspaper clipping. "Were there any attempts at identification?" asked the millionaire, keeping his voice neutral despite the inner turmoil. The doctor flipped through other pages of the chart. The belongings found with him were severely damaged by the fire. The police tried fingerprint identification, but there were no compatible records in the system. Without documents or a cell phone, he was classified as indigent. "And no visitors in almost 2 years?" The doctor adjusted his glasses uncomfortably. "This is a private hospital, sir. Indigent cases are typically transferred to the public system, but..." He hesitated, clearly embarrassed. "But," the millionaire pressed, "one of our neurologists identified an unusual brain pattern. He decided to keep him for study, with the justification that the experimental protocols could benefit him." The millionaire felt a surge of anger rising up his spine. A human being, possibly his own brother, reduced to a research subject. "I want to see him, now!" On the other side of the hospital, the girl was experiencing another kind of transformation. A kind nurse, hand-picked after the reception incident, had helped her with a warm bath, clean clothes, and a substantial meal. Her teddy bear had also received care, with the tears stitched and the fabric cleaned as much as possible without further damaging the worn toy. "Do you feel better now, honey?" asked the nurse, combing the child's hair, which now revealed a golden hue previously hidden under layers of grime. The girl nodded silently, her eyes fixed on the door. She expected at any moment the return of that strange man who, for some reason she didn't fully understand, had decided to help her. "Is the man in the suit going to take me to see my daddy?" she asked finally, unable to contain her anxiety. The nurse smiled gently. "He's checking on some important things. I'm sure he'll be back soon." When the millionaire finally entered the room, his expression was even more serious than before. He observed the girl's transformation with an indecipherable gaze. Clean and fed, the family resemblance became even more evident. "We've found a patient who might be your father," he said directly, always preferring the harsh truth to unfounded hope. "But I need you to understand something very important. He's deeply asleep. He can't talk or move. Doctors call it a coma." The girl digested the information with surprising maturity. "I know what a coma is," she replied simply. "The lady at the library let me read medical books with pictures. If we talk to him, even when he's sleeping, maybe he'll hear us and wake up faster." The millionaire felt a lump in his throat at that naive and, at the same time, profoundly wise hope. "There's one more thing," he continued, sitting down beside her. It was the most difficult conversation he'd had in years. "I think I know your father. If he's who I think he is, I'm your uncle." The girl's eyes widened with a mixture of confusion and hope. "Uncle? Like the uncle in Daddy's stories? The one who moved away because they had a falling out?" The impact of those words hit the millionaire like a physical blow. So his brother spoke of him to his daughter, even after so many years of estrangement. "Yes," he replied, his voice almost failing. "That uncle. Daddy said that one day you would make up, because brothers are brothers forever, even when they're angry." "Indeed." The millionaire looked away, unable to face the innocence of that statement. How to explain to a child that some wounds are too deep, that some mistakes seem unforgivable? "I'm going to take you to see him now," he said, changing the subject. "But I need you to be strong." For the first time since he'd met her, he saw a genuine smile light up the girl's face. It was like watching the sunrise after a long night of storm, a rare and precious phenomenon that, against all logic, awakened in him an instinct for protection that he thought he had lost long ago. "I'm strong," she affirmed, standing up and holding her teddy bear with determination. "Daddy always said I'm the strongest person he knows." The millionaire offered his hand, a gesture so simple and so deeply significant that for a moment he hesitated. The small hand that fit into his seemed fragile, but conveyed a strength that he had forgotten existed in the world. Together, uncle and niece walked down the corridor towards a meeting that would change the course of 3 lives forever. Room 1742 was surprisingly silent, except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. Light filters on the windows created an eternally twilight atmosphere, as if time were suspended in that small space. The millionaire stopped at the door, suddenly insecure. Through the glass, he could see the patient's silhouette, motionless, under immaculate hospital sheets, connected to tubes and wires that seemed to anchor him to this world. "That's him," whispered the girl beside him, squeezing her uncle's hand with renewed strength. There was no doubt in her voice, only absolute certainty. The doctor accompanying them cast a worried glance at the millionaire. "Sir, I must warn you that visits can be disturbing for such a young child. She's waited 2 years for this moment," the millionaire replied firmly. "I won't be the one to deny it now." Inside the room, the smell of antiseptic and medications created an invisible barrier between the world of the living and that suspended existence. The girl released her uncle's hand and approached the bed with deliberately slow steps, as if she feared that any sudden movement could break the spell of that moment. "Daddy," she called softly, placing the teddy bear next to the pillow. "I brought your friend back. I took good care of him like you asked." The millionaire felt his chest tighten. It was him, without a doubt. Despite the overgrown beard and the visible signs of the traumas suffered, that was his older brother, the same one who taught him to ride a bike, who defended him from the school bullies, who was once his best friend before pride and ambition separated them. "Why doesn't he wake up?" asked the girl, turning to her uncle with questioning eyes. "His brain suffered a very strong blow," explained the millionaire, approaching. "Sometimes it takes time to heal." The little girl nodded, absorbing the information, with that understanding that went beyond her age. "Can I tell him what happened while he was sleeping?" The doctor, standing discreetly in the corner of the room, nodded affirmatively. "Patients in comas can often hear. Talking is recommended." Thus began the most extraordinary storytelling session the millionaire had ever witnessed. For almost an hour, the girl narrated her 2-year odyssey. Life on the streets, the temporary shelters she abandoned when no one was paying attention, the relentless search guided only by a newspaper clipping, and an unwavering conviction. There was no self-pity in her narrative, only the objective description of someone who did what needed to be done. The millionaire listened in silence, each word adding weight to the guilt he now carried. While he amassed more millions, his niece slept under overpasses, counting stars and promising the teddy bear that she would find her father. "And today I met my uncle," she concluded, casting a shy glance towards the millionaire. "He's just like you said, Daddy. He seems tough on the outside, but you can see he's different on the inside." The millionaire looked away, suddenly vulnerable, under the scrutiny of those childish eyes that seemed to see beyond the layers of protection he had built over the years. The door opened at that moment, and the millionaire's assistant entered with a grave expression, followed by the company's lawyer. "Sir, we need to talk. In private." In the corridor, away from the girl's ears, the lawyer laid out the situation. In cold, legal terms, "We've confirmed the identity through old records. He is, in fact, your brother. As for the child, without formal documentation or parental authorization, the situation is delicate. Social services will need to be involved." "No." The millionaire's response was categorical. "She's not going into the system. Get the paperwork for temporary guardianship. Use all the resources necessary." The lawyer hesitated. "Sir, with all Due respect, there are important considerations. Your schedule doesn't allow for the care that a child requires. Furthermore, any deviation from your usual behavior will be noticed by the press. Someone in your position must consider the implications for the corporate image. For the first time in years, the millionaire laughed. A harsh, almost painful sound, like a rusty tool being used again. Corporate image? This is my niece, blood of my blood. What kind of person have I become that you find it reasonable to suggest I abandon her again? The assistant and the lawyer exchanged worried glances. This was not the calculating and cold man they knew. Something fundamental had changed in the last few hours. I will personally make the necessary arrangements, conceded the lawyer. But I must warn you, once you start down this road, it won't be easy to turn back. The millionaire looked through the glass into the room where the girl continued her one-sided conversation with her unconscious father. At the exact moment, as if she felt his gaze, she raised her head and smiled. A pure and confident smile that radiated a certainty he had long lost. I don't want to turn back, he replied, surprised by the firmness in his own voice. I want to move forward. Terminal cancer. Diagnosis received 3 months before the fire. The millionaire stared at the old medical records retrieved from the doctor's office, where his brother had been a patient. The images and reports told a silent story of pain and despair that he had never suspected. Why didn't he reach out to me? He murmured to himself, the question echoing in the silence of his makeshift office at the hospital. 2 weeks had passed since the encounter with the girl. 2 weeks of accelerated transformations in a life that was once meticulously ordered. Temporary guardianship had been granted after a lightning legal battle, won with the influence and resources that only someone in his position could mobilize. An entire floor of the hospital was being renovated at his orders, not only to accommodate more advanced equipment for his brother's treatment, but also to create an environment where the girl could stay close to her father without the usual visitation restrictions. His personal assistant entered with his usual discretion, placing a folder on the table. The last records we were able to locate, sir, and the newspapers from the time of the fire. The millionaire's eyes quickly scanned the headlines. A seemingly accidental fire in an apartment building on the west side of town. 2 confirmed deaths, 3 injured. Among the survivors, a child rescued by firefighters. The child's name was not mentioned, but now he knew it was her, his niece. Where did she go after that? He asked, almost to himself. Apparently to a temporary shelter, replied the assistant. But there's a gap in the documentation. She simply disappeared from the system a few weeks later. A 4-year-old child, wandering alone through the city while her father remained in a coma and her uncle accumulated fortunes in his glass and steel skyscraper. Guilt was a new feeling for the millionaire, accustomed to justifying all his actions with the impersonality of business. Sir, continued the assistant, visibly uncomfortable. There's something else. We found this among your brother's preserved belongings. A letter. The envelope, singed at the edges, had his name written in his brother's unmistakable handwriting. Dated 3 days before the fire, it had never reached its destination. With trembling fingers, the millionaire opened the envelope. The words contained within were like daggers, piercing directly into his armored heart. Brother, when you read this, I will probably be gone. The doctors gave me 3 months, but I feel it will be sooner. The cancer has progressed faster than they predicted. I'm not writing to ask for financial help or late compassion. I'm writing because of her. My daughter, my little star. You don't even know she exists, the fault of my foolish pride that has kept us apart all these years. She, as your eyes, you know, the same eyes as our mother, smart like you were in childhood before the world hardened us. I told her about you, the brilliant uncle who built an empire, but who one day I hoped would return to being the brother I knew. I have made arrangements for her to stay with her mother after I'm gone. I would never ask you to abandon your meticulously planned life to take care of a child you don't even know. I know how much you value your freedom and your solitude. But if something happens to both of us, if fate is even crueler than it already has been, I ask only that you find her, that you meet her, even if briefly, that you see in her what could have been if we had chosen love over pride. Forgive me for the silence of these years. In the end, I realize that none of it really matters. Your brother, always. The millionaire let the letter fall onto the table. His world completely turned upside down. His brother was dying and tried to reach him one last time, not for himself, but for his daughter. The girl's mother must not have died in the fire. The arrangements mentioned in the letter never materialized because fate, in fact, had been even crueler. And all this time, while he was signing billion-dollar contracts and accumulating more power, his niece lived on the streets, guided only by hope and a newspaper clipping. "Sir?" The assistant's voice brought him back to reality. "The nurse said the girl is asking for you." For the first time in years, the millionaire couldn't maintain his professional composure. A solitary tear ran down his face, followed by another and another. "Tell her I'm coming," he replied, carefully putting away the letter, "and cancel all my appointments for the next month. All of them." When he entered the hospital room where the girl waited beside her father's bed, the millionaire was a transformed man. The mask of indifference had fallen, revealing the humanity he had tried so hard to hide. "I found something your father wrote," he said, sitting down beside her. "He loved you very much. He called you Little Star." The girl smiled, a smile that lit up the room more than the sunlight streaming through the gaps in the curtains. "I know. He always said that even when he couldn't see me anymore, he would be watching me from heaven, like a star. He also wrote about me," continued the millionaire, his voice choked with contained emotion. "He said I was brilliant as a child." "You still are," she replied with the disconcerting simplicity of children. "You just forgot for a while." At that moment, the monitors that recorded the patient's brain activity showed a subtle change. The doctor, who was observing the scene from the door, approached quickly. "There's been a response," he explained, examining the data. "Small, but significant. It's the first since he was admitted." The girl squeezed her father's hand tightly. "See, he's listening. He knows we're here." The millionaire felt something he hadn't experienced since his distant childhood. Hope. Not the calculated hope of returns on investments or market growth, but the pure and simple hope that tomorrow might be better than today. "Yes," he agreed, placing his hand over his nieces and his brothers, uniting the three of them for the first time. "He knows. Tech tycoon shelters, street child, charity or scandal." The headline screamed on the front page of the city's best-selling tabloid. The millionaire stared at the main photograph with disgust, him and the girl leaving the hospital, captured by a hidden paparazzo. The child's face, thankfully, had been partially shielded by the angle, but it was clearly an image obtained without consent. "How did this leak?" he asked the assistant, who seemed equally disturbed by the breach of privacy. "We believe a hospital employee sold the information," the man replied. "We've already launched an internal investigation." A month had passed since the discovery of the letter, a month of profound changes in the millionaire's life. Temporary guardianship of his niece had been made official. The hospital floor had been transformed into an environment where she could stay close to her father, while medical teams implemented experimental protocols that were showing promising results. The girl now attended private tutoring sessions with the best teachers, quickly making up for lost time. To everyone's surprise, especially the uncles, her level of knowledge was surprisingly advanced for someone who had spent 2 years on the streets. Public libraries, she explained simply, were warm in the winter and cool in the summer. a perfect refuge where she spent hours devouring any book within reach. The corporate world that once consumed all the millionaire's energy now occupied only a fraction of his attention. For the first time, he delegated responsibilities, refused non-essential meetings, and left the office during regular business hours, all to spend more time with his niece and his hospitalized brother. This transformation evidently did not go unnoticed, and now the sensationalist press was fueling malicious speculation about his motives. "That's not all," continued the assistant, handing over a phone with a text message open. "Your former partner is behind this. He's teamed up with one of the doctors who felt wronged by the changes we implemented at the hospital." The millionaire read the message, a veiled threat to expose alleged irregularities in the way he obtained guardianship of the girl, insinuating influence peddling and manipulation of the system. "He's always been a vulture," he muttered, returning the phone, "waiting for me to show some weakness to attack." The legal department suggests a defensive strategy, a formal statement explaining the family relationship, perhaps a controlled interview to neutralize the rumors. The millionaire shook his head. "I'm not going to expose the girl to the media. She's been through enough trauma already." At that moment, as if invoked by the conversation, his niece entered the makeshift office, dressed in simple but quality clothes, carrying school books and her inseparable teddy bear. She looked like a normal child, except for her eyes, which carried a wisdom beyond her age. "Uncle, the teacher said I finished all the math exercises correctly," she announced with contained pride. Then, noticing the tension in the room, she added, "Did something bad happen?" The millionaire exchanged glances with the assistant, who discreetly withdrew from the room. How to explain to a 6-year-old child the complexities of the adult world, with its petty ambitions and calculated betrayals? "Some people are saying not very nice things about us," he replied finally, opting for simplified honesty. "People who don't understand our family." The girl nodded, absorbing the information. "Like the kids at the shelter who said I was a liar when I said my daddy was alive." "Something like that," he agreed, surprised once again by his niece's perspicacity. "The lady at the library taught me that some people need to say bad things about others to feel better," she continued, settling into the chair in front of the desk. "She said they're like punctured balloons trying to fill other balloons. It doesn't work, but they keep trying." The millionaire couldn't contain a smile at the perfect analogy. "That lady at the library sounds very wise. She let me stay there even after closing time sometimes," confided the girl. "Do you think we can visit her one day? I want to show her that I found my daddy like I promised." The simplicity of that request amidst the storm that was brewing around him touched the millionaire deeply. While he worried about headlines and threats, she thought about fulfilling promises and expressing gratitude. "Of course we can," he replied, making a decision at that very moment. "In fact, I think we should do more than that." In the following weeks, while tabloids continued their smear campaign and his former partner moved pieces behind the scenes, the millionaire began a side project. A network of community libraries in underserved neighborhoods with spaces dedicated to at-risk children began to take shape. The first would be inaugurated at the location where his niece had found refuge during her days on the streets. What had started as an image crisis transformed into a mission, not to clear his name or silence critics, but to create something that truly mattered. Opportunities for other children like his niece who just needed a safe place to dream. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the medical team reported slow but consistent progress in his brother's condition. Small movements of the fingers, changes in brain patterns during his daughter's visits, subtle responses to specific stimuli, signs that fueled hope. What the millionaire didn't know was that his former partner was preparing an even lower blow, involving Child Protective Services with fabricated allegations. The storm he thought he was facing was just the prelude to a much larger hurricane. Approaching. "Sir, they're here." The assistant's urgent tone made the millionaire look up from the documents he was analyzing. Through the glass doors of his office, he could see 3 people in the hospital lobby, 2 men in suits and a woman with an official-looking folder. "Child Protective Services," the assistant explained, keeping his voice low. "They have a warrant to assess the guardianship conditions. They claim to have received reports of unsuitable environment and possible exploitation of image." The millionaire felt the blood run cold in his veins. It was the move he had feared. The blow orchestrated by his former partner to hurt him where it would hurt the most. Where is she? In her father's room with the tutor, science lesson. Keep them occupied at the front desk. Call our lawyer immediately. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Alone for a moment, the millionaire allowed himself to feel the weight of the situation. 6 weeks ago, his biggest concern was closing a multi-million-dollar deal. Now, he faced the possibility of losing the niece he didn't even know existed until recently. When he entered the hospital room, the scene he found squeezed his heart in a way he never thought possible. The girl was sitting beside her father's bed, showing him an astronomy book explaining constellations with childlike enthusiasm, while the tutor watched with a smile. "And this is the Big Dipper, Daddy. It looks a little like my teddy bear, don't you think? Uncle said that when you wake up, we're all going to see the real stars with a super powerful telescope." How to interrupt that moment? How to explain that strangers were coming to question their right to be together? The tutor noticed his presence and, noting his expression, understood that something serious was happening. With professional discretion, she suggested to the girl that she make a drawing of the constellations for when her father woke up. "We need to talk," the millionaire said to his niece when they were relatively alone, the unconscious brother as the only witness. "Some people have come to ask questions about how you're living here." The girl looked up from the drawing, a shadow of fear crossing her gaze. "Are they going to take me away?" The question, asked with the brutal objectivity that only children possess, hit him like a punch. "No," he replied with a firmness that came from the depths of his being. "I won't let that happen." "Promise?" she insisted, those eyes, so similar to his own, fixed on his face, seeking the truth that children always manage to detect. "I promise," he replied, kneeling down to be at her level. "But we need to be very honest with these people. They're going to ask a lot of questions. Some may seem strange or scary." The girl nodded, a serious expression taking over her childish face. "I answer hard questions. I did it a lot at the shelters." Again, the millionaire felt a wave of admiration for the resilience of that small soul. While he had power, influence, and unlimited resources, she possessed an inner strength that no fortune could buy. In the hospital lobby, the confrontation was less dramatic than he feared. His lawyer had already arrived, armed with impeccable documentation, the legally obtained temporary guardianship, psychological reports attesting to the child's well-being, educational reports showing her academic progress, even a letter from the hospital director confirming that the environment had been adapted to meet all the girl's needs while allowing her to remain close to her father. The Child Protective Services team, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, admitted that the complaint had arrived anonymously with serious but vague allegations. "Still, we need to follow protocol," explained the social worker, a middle-aged woman with tired but kind eyes. "Talk to the child, assess the environment, file a report." "I understand perfectly," replied the millionaire, surprising his own lawyer with his conciliatory tone. "I only want the best for my niece. If there's anything I can improve, I'm open to suggestions." This approach, so different from the combative posture that everyone expected from the powerful businessman, partially disarmed the team. The interview with the girl was conducted in a quiet environment, with the lawyer and the tutor present as silent observers. The child's answers, direct and honest, painted a picture that no manipulation could distort. Yes, she lived in the hospital temporarily to be close to her father. Yes, she had lessons every day. Yes, her uncle spent time with her, helped with homework, read stories, explained about stars and planets. No, he never yelled or scared her. Yes, she had enough food, clothes, toys, and books. And more importantly, she had her mended teddy bear and was close to her father. "And before, you lived with your uncle?" asked the social worker. "Can you tell me about that?" The girl then recounted her odyssey through the streets with devastating clarity. The shelters that didn't believe her about her father being alive, the nights under awnings, the libraries that became her refuge, the relentless search guided only by a newspaper clipping. When she finished, there were tears in the social worker's eyes. The millionaire, watching through the glass of the room, saw the woman close her folder with a determined gesture, even before completing all the items in her assessment. Later, in his office, she was direct. "Someone is trying to use our department as a weapon in some kind of personal vendetta against you. That's disgusting, and we won't participate in it. The girl is clearly in good hands." The millionaire felt an immense weight lift from his shoulders. "Thank you." "I'm not doing this for you," she replied with professional honesty. "I'm doing it for the child. She's been through enough trauma without being used as a pawn in adult games." As the team left, the millionaire received a call, his former partner's name flashing on the phone screen. After a moment of hesitation, he answered. "Looks like your little plan backfired," he said simply. The laughter on the other end of the line made his blood boil. "That was just a warning, old friend. The real battle has barely begun." For the first time in his life, the millionaire didn't feel anger or a desire for revenge. Instead, he felt pity for a man so empty that he would use an innocent child as a weapon. "You're fighting a war you've already lost," he replied calmly, "because now I have something to fight for that's worth more than money or power." As he hung up, he saw his niece in the office doorway, the teddy bear firmly clutched against her chest. "Is everything okay, Uncle?" "Yes, little star," he replied, using for the first time the nickname his brother had given his daughter. "Everything is okay now." The heart monitor emitted a different beep, causing the girl to look up from the book she was reading aloud. For a moment, panic took over her face, until she realized it wasn't an alarm sound, but a different, stronger pattern. "Uncle," she called, without taking her eyes off her father. "I think he moved his hand." The millionaire, who was working on his laptop in the corner of the room, jumped to his feet. 3 months had passed since that first day at the hospital. 3 months of a completely transformed routine. Mornings shared with his niece, afternoons divided between work and visits to his brother's room, evenings of bedtime stories and conversations about constellations. The mansion that once served only as a symbol of status now housed childlike laughter. One of the rooms had been transformed into a small observatory with a powerful telescope pointed at the sky. Another had become a princess room, not by imposition of adult stereotypes, but by the choice of the girl herself, who after years of sleeping on sidewalks, dreamed of a magical and colorful space. The former partner had continued his attempts at sabotage, but each of his moves was anticipated and neutralized. The millionaire was no longer playing to win, he was playing to protect what really mattered. Now, standing beside the hospital bed, he watched his brother's face intently. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, the fingers of his right hand moved. A slight but definite spasm. "I'll call the doctor," he said, trying to contain his own emotion so as not to fuel premature hopes in his niece. The head neurologist of the team arrived in minutes, accompanied by 2 assistants. After a series of tests, they confirmed what they already suspected. He's responding to stimuli more consistently. Brain activity has increased significantly in the last 48 hours. The doctor adjusted his glasses, consulting the data on the tablet. The experimental treatment seems to be working better than expected. Does that mean he's going to wake up? Asked the girl, holding her father's hand as if she could anchor him to the world of the awakened through pure willpower. It's a good sign, replied the doctor cautiously, but we need to be patient. Recoveries from prolonged comas are slow and unpredictable processes. When they were alone again, the girl laid her head next to her father's arm on the bed. I dreamed. He woke up today, she confessed in a low voice. It felt so real. The millionaire sat on the other side of the bed, observing that connection that not even 2 years of separation and months of coma had managed to break. Dreams, sometimes. Show us what's to come, he said, surprised by his own words. He who had always been a man of concrete facts and figures. How do I know if he still remembers me? The question came out almost as a whisper, revealing the fear that the girl kept hidden under layers of hope and optimism. Some things are impossible to forget, replied the millionaire, reaching out to adjust a strand of hair that fell over his niece's face, like the love for a little star. That night, against all the hospital rules that technically no longer applied to him since he had become the main investor, the millionaire decided that they would stay in the room. Armchairs were transformed into makeshift beds. The girl fell asleep, clutching her teddy bear, while the uncle remained awake, working silently on his laptop. It was shortly after midnight that the sound occurred, a low groan, almost inaudible. The millionaire looked up, unsure if he had imagined it. Then it came again, followed by a more pronounced movement of the patient's eyelids, with a racing heart. He approached the bed. "Brother," he called softly, trying not to wake the girl. "Can you hear me?" The eyelids trembled more intensely. Then, as if performing the most difficult task in the world, the man's eyes opened, just a slit, struggling against the dim light of the room. "The star." The voice was just a hoarse whisper, almost inaudible after months of silence. The millionaire felt warm tears stream down his face. "She's here," he replied, unable to control his emotion. "Your little star. She found you." Carefully not to startle her, he touched his niece's shoulder, waking her gently. "Look," he whispered, pointing to her father. The girl opened her eyes, initially confused by the sudden awakening. Then her gaze met her father's, eyes half open, exhausted, but undeniably conscious, fixed on her as if he were contemplating a mirage he feared would disappear. "Daddy?" Her voice trembled, suspended between dream and reality. A tear trickled from the corner of the man's eye, while his parched lips moved in an attempt at a smile. The millionaire watched, paralyzed by emotion, as the girl approached with hesitant steps, as if she feared that any sudden movement could break the spell of that moment. "You found me," whispered the man, each word costing a monumental effort. "I promised I'd find you," she replied, the tears now flowing freely. "And Uncle helped me." The patient's gaze moved slowly until it found his brother's face. Years of estrangement, hurt feelings, and wounded pride condensed into a single look of recognition. "Thank you," he murmured, before the effort made him fall asleep again, no longer in a coma, but in the natural sleep of recovery. The on-call physician, called in urgently, confirmed what their hearts already knew. The long road back had begun. The recovery would be slow, with challenges and setbacks, but the worst part, the uncertainty about whether he would ever return, was behind them. That dawn, sitting between his sleeping brother and his niece, who was finally resting with a smile on her face, the millionaire understood the true dimension of wealth. not in the numbers of his bank accounts or the power of his corporate empire, but in the restored connection that now pulsed between three hearts that fate had tried to separate. Ready for the big surprise? The millionaire adjusted the blindfold on his brother's eyes, while his niece bounced with excitement beside them. 6 months had passed since the awakening from the coma. Months of intensive physical therapy, speech therapy, and gradual recovery with progress and setbacks, but always moving forward. The man, now in a wheelchair that the doctors assured was temporary, smiled with the characteristic impatience he had always had. Some things the coma hadn't changed. "I've been ready since you blindfolded me in the car," he replied, his voice still hoarser than normal, but growing stronger every day. "Besides, how much longer are we going to drive? I'm starting to suspect you've taken me to another state." The girl laughed, a crystalline sound that echoed through the hallway of the building where they were walking. "We're here, Daddy. Can I count to 3? "Go ahead, little star." 1, 2, 3. The millionaire removed the blindfold from his brother's eyes, revealing the open door of a completely renovated apartment. Not just any apartment, but the same one where he and his daughter had lived before the fire, in the same neighborhood, on the same floor, now rebuilt and adapted to their needs. "This is..." The man couldn't complete the sentence, emotion choking his words. "Our home," completed the girl, running inside. "Come see, Daddy. There are ramps everywhere, and the doors are super wide for your chair, and the bathroom has special bars, and my room has stars that glow on the ceiling, just like real ones." While his daughter conducted an enthusiastic tour of the apartment, the two brothers shared a look laden with meaning. It wasn't just an apartment, it was the restoration of something they both believed they had lost forever. "You didn't need to do this," said the older brother when they were briefly alone. "Your mansion is more than enough for the 3 of us." The millionaire adjusted the wheelchair so they could observe the view from the balcony, the same view his brother had contemplated years ago before everything fell apart. "This place is important to you," he replied simply. "And now it's important to me too." In the girl's room, carefully decorated to replicate her happiest memories, there was an additional surprise. A bookshelf filled with new books, and the mended teddy bear sitting in a place of honor on the bed, wearing a small t-shirt with the logo of the community library that the millionaire had founded. The inauguration of the library network had taken place 2 weeks earlier, with the girl cutting the opening ribbon. The project, initially conceived as a response to the former partner's attacks, had transformed into the most meaningful mission of the millionaire's life. Now 6 new libraries were under construction, each with safe spaces for vulnerable children and free educational programs. The former partner, after a last failed attempt to harm them, had disappeared from the radar. Not by chance. An official investigation into his business practices had been opened after anonymous documents reached the authorities. The millionaire would never confirm his involvement, but the gleam in his eyes when the subject was mentioned said it all. "How are you feeling?" he asked his brother when the girl ran to explore the small observatory installed on the building's terrace, a scaled-down replica of what was in the mansion. "Like I won the lottery twice," replied the man, watching his daughter through the glass door. "Once when I woke up and she was there, exactly like in my dreams during the coma. And again when I found out that my hard-headed brother had finally learned what really matters in life." Both laughed, a sound they hadn't shared in over a decade. The scars of the past were still there, but they no longer hurt as before. "The doctors are optimistic about you walking again," commented the millionaire, changing the subject. "I'm more worried about getting back to work. I can't depend on you forever." The millionaire shook his head. "Actually, I need you. The foundation. Need someone to run the educational programs, someone who understands the value of books and knowledge in a child's life." The older brother's eyes sparkled with contained emotion. You created a foundation. We formalized it last week, the Little Star Foundation. Half of my annual profits will be directed to projects supporting at-risk children and their families. Before his brother could answer, the girl ran back from the terrace. Daddy, Uncle, come see. You can see the library from here. The two men exchanged knowing smiles before joining her. Indeed, a few blocks away, the roof of the new community library was perfectly visible, its modern structure contrasting with the older buildings in the neighborhood. At dusk, when the first stars began to dot the sky, the three gathered on the terrace. The millionaire had brought the telescope, now adjusted so his brother could use it from his wheelchair. Look, said the girl, pointing excitedly at the sky. It's Orion, the hunter's constellation. The millionaire smiled, impressed with the astronomical knowledge she had absorbed in recent months. And what's your favorite star? He asked, already knowing the answer. Betelgeuse, she replied readily, the brightest star in Orion. Daddy taught me that red giant stars like it are the oldest and wisest in the sky. The father reached out, holding his daughter's hand. And do you remember what else I told you about them? The girl nodded solemnly. That even when a red giant star dies, its light continues to travel through the universe. So even when it seems like it's gone, it's actually still shining for someone somewhere. The millionaire felt a lump in his throat as he realized the parallel with their story. The father who seemed to have disappeared, but who was actually still there, waiting to be found. You know what else I learned about stars? Asked the girl, looking between her father and her uncle with that wisdom that transcended her age. They're never really alone. They're always part of something bigger, a constellation. That night, as the city fell asleep around them, three people whom fate had separated and reunited contemplated the universe together, no longer as isolated individuals in their own orbits, but as a constellation of their own, three stars linked by invisible ties stronger than any force in the universe. The millionaire, looking at his brother and his niece, finally understood the meaning of true wealth. Not that which accumulates in vaults and bank accounts, but that which multiplies when shared, that which grows each time a heart opens to another. The barefoot girl with a tattered teddy bear had brought more value to his life than all the deals he had ever closed. The brother he thought he had lost forever was now walking alongside him on a new path. And he, who had spent years building walls around his heart, was now learning to tear down each barrier, one by one. Look, a shooting star, exclaimed the girl, pointing to the night sky. Make a wish, suggested her father. She closed her eyes for a moment, concentrated, before opening them with a serene smile. I don't need anything else, she declared simply. I already have everything I ever wished for. The millionaire exchanged a meaningful glance with his brother, both silently agreeing. They didn't need anything else either. The circle was complete, the family restored, the wounds healed. Under the starry cloak, three hearts beat in unison, no longer lost in the vastness of the universe, but anchored to each other, like stars in the same constellation. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day.